If you think HOA horror stories are bad, wait until you hear how mine ended with cops pulling triggers in my driveway, a frozen garage door hiding more secrets than a spy novel, and a governor bleeding on my concrete. Subscribe right now so you don't miss the rest of this insane saga, because what happened to me could easily happen to anyone bold enough to stand up against an HOA Karen with too much power and way too much time on her hands. I never thought my life would spiral into chaos over something as simple as opening my garage, but that's exactly how it began the day HOA Karen decided she had the right to call the cops on me, claiming I was a dangerous threat to the community simply because I didn't mow my lawn on her preferred schedule. And when I pressed the button to raise my garage door that morning, still groggy from a sleepless night of dealing with her nasty emails about trash bins and the color of my shutters, I had no idea she had already dialed 911 and whispered into the phone that I was armed and dangerous, a fabricated threat that would soon escalate into the most surreal, twisted series of events anyone in my neighborhood, or the entire country, had ever witnessed, because the cops came screeching down the cul-de-sac with sirens blaring and guns drawn, pointing their weapons at me as I stood there in nothing but a coffee-stained t-shirt, trying to wave them off and explain that I was simply grabbing a wrench from my garage to fix the loose hinge on the mailbox she herself had complained about 2 weeks earlier. But before I could even take another breath, one officer fired a warning shot into the air, another screamed at me to get down, and Karen herself stood at the edge of her driveway, hands on her hips, smirking like she had finally won some HOA battle that she had been preparing for all her miserable life. Yet the universe was about to turn on her in ways even she couldn't have predicted, because the garage door, old and creaky as it was, froze halfway up with a loud metallic groan as if it too wanted to protest the madness, and when the door stopped rising, all eyes widened as the shadowy figure of none other than the governor of the state slumped into view, his suit torn, his face pale, his chest bleeding from a fresh gunshot wound, and the silence that followed was broken only by Karen's shriek of confused horror. Because how could a governor be lying inside my garage as though he had been hiding there all along? And why did it look like the police had already shot him before they even knew what was going on? A truth that would unravel into a conspiracy so deep that my entire neighborhood would become ground zero for the biggest scandal in state history. Yet at that moment, all I could think was that I had just wanted to grab a wrench, drink my coffee in peace, and maybe fix a stupid hinge. But now I was flat on my stomach with cops yelling contradictory commands, Karen yelling that I was a terrorist, and the governor bleeding out on the cement like some twisted scene from a political thriller. Only this wasn't Netflix, it was my actual life unraveling in real time, and as paramedics rushed in to haul the governor away, one of the cops pulled me roughly to my feet, demanding to know what I had done to him, and when I stammered that I had never even met the man, that I didn't even vote for him, Karen jumped in with her poisoned tongue, shrieking that she had seen me sneaking mysterious crates into the garage late at night, which in her twisted imagination was proof of a plot against democracy, but the truth behind those crates was so much more ridiculous and yet incriminating. They weren't weapons or contraband, they were simply bulk orders of garage door lubricant and discount patio furniture I had scored online, though now none of that mattered, because the governor's security detail was nowhere to be found. The cops were frantic, and the news helicopters began circling above like vultures smelling blood, capturing my face, my house, and my neighborhood for the entire state to see, transforming me from a sleepy homeowner into the prime suspect of a political assassination. And still Karen smirked like this was the victory she had dreamed of, her HOA empire finally validated as the cameras zoomed in on her pointing her finger at me like a wicked queen exposing a traitor. But she didn't realize that what she had unleashed would soon consume her as well, because in her eagerness to destroy me she had tied herself into a conspiracy that went beyond broken mailboxes and mismatched curtains, reaching all the way to backroom deals, embezzled funds, and secret meetings that she herself had attended in her desperate climb for HOA supremacy. And as I was shoved into the back of a squad car, I could still see her face illuminated by the flashing red and blue lights, smug yet nervous, triumphant yet shaky, because deep down even she knew that things had spun out of her control, and little did she know that the governor's last whispered words before losing consciousness would include her name, her secret, and her downfall. Though at that time I couldn't hear them, I only learned later that he had muttered something about Karen, the files, the garage, words that would ignite a spiral of investigations, betrayals, and revelations that would make my life unrecognizable. And as the hours passed, I sat in interrogation rooms under harsh fluorescent lights, accused of plotting to assassinate the governor, accused of stockpiling weapons, accused of being the mastermind behind a coup, all while the cameras outside spun their own narrative of me as a suburban villain. But the real twist came when evidence began to leak showing that Karen had been in constant communication with a shadowy political action committee, her emails riddled with demands for favors in exchange for her cooperation in staging chaos in the suburbs. And suddenly I wasn't just the suspect, I was the key witness, the accidental whistleblower, the one man standing between Karen's fantasy of law dominance and the truth of a governor betrayed by his own allies. Because the frozen garage door had revealed more than a bleeding politician, it had exposed the rotten core of a system where petty tyrants like Karen could become pawns in a much bigger game. And as the days turned into weeks, my house became a fortress of reporters, investigators, and curious neighbors who once avoided me but now whispered my name like I was both cursed and legendary. Yet through it all I never forgot that it all started because I pressed a button to open my garage. Something so mundane transformed into a spark that lit up the state with scandal, and the deeper investigators dug, the more Karen's empire crumbled. Financial fraud in WADUs, illegal surveillance cameras hidden in birdhouses, blackmail schemes involving neighborhood bake sales, and ties to lobbyists who funneled money through community beautification projects that were nothing more than slush funds. And though she tried to pivot, to paint herself as the hero who had bravely called the cops to prevent an assassination, the evidence mounted against her until she was the one in handcuffs, her mugshot plastered across the same news channels that once showed her pointing at me with smug delight. And the ultimate irony was that I, the man she had tried to destroy, became the reluctant hero who testified against her, cleared my name, and exposed the web of corruption stretching from the governor's mansion to the WA clubhouse. Yet even in victory I felt no joy, only exhaustion, because what had been stolen from me was peace, normalcy, the quiet life of fixing a mailbox hinge without the weight of helicopters and cameras and cops aiming rifles at me. And though the world eventually moved on to the next scandal, my neighbors still look at me differently, whispering when I walk by, half in awe, half in fear, as if my garage is cursed ground where history happened. And maybe they're right, because every time I press that garage button, I half expect it to freeze again, to reveal another hidden secret, to expose another layer of madness lurking behind suburban fences. And sometimes late at night I hear Karen's voice echoing in my head, shrill and triumphant, reminding me that no matter how much justice was served, the scars of that day remain etched into the very walls of my home. A story too insane for fiction yet undeniably true. And if you've made it this far, remember, never underestimate the power of an HOA Karen, never underestimate the danger of a frozen garage, and for the love of sanity, subscribe, because the next chapter in this nightmare is already waiting behind another door, and you'll want to be here when it opens.